Would you believe me if I told you that a random pen I bought at a 7-Eleven changed the way that I make art? And even my life a little bit, to be honest. Let me explain. I've always wanted to be one of those people that can just sit outside and make art. You know, like Sarah Burns or Jess Karp. Just sitting outside with your sketchbook, capturing the world around you. I've always thought that's so cool. So a few years ago, when I traveled to Japan, I was determined that I was going to paint every single day of my trip. Even though I didn't really have any sort of established painting practice at home, I just thought, I'll start doing it while I'm away. And if you're thinking, well, that's crazy and highly unlikely, you'd be right. But I'm hard-headed and a romantic, so I was sure that in between walking 40,000 steps a day, trying to see and eat everything in my wake, I was going to somehow have a few hours every day to sit and paint, while my husband just sits and waits for me. At the time, I honestly thought there's no way this plan won't work. So I carried a huge backpack with all my art supplies in it everywhere with me, and I mean everywhere. But of course, day after day, I couldn't find time to paint at all. Okay, maybe I did one painting, but the rest of the time I was honestly just giving myself pretty bad pain in my back from carrying this mobile art studio everywhere with me. Until one night, inside of a random 7-Eleven in Kyoto, I saw this pen and this tiny sketchbook. I bought them, and that same night I started trying to sketch people's shoes. Just shy little sketches. I didn't know it then, but that moment would become the beginning of me falling in love with ink. And here's why you might want to give it a try too. After those first scared little sketches, I said goodbye to the huge backpack and all the art supplies that traveled all the way from Croatia to Japan just to get a stamp on their passports. And I switched to something far more simpler. A few pens, a tiny sketchbook, that was it. Suddenly, I was drawing all the time. If I was in the metro, I was drawing. If I was waiting for my matcha, I was drawing. If there were suddenly deer in front of my face, I was drawing. Even in front of Mount Fuji, I was drawing. I think the reason I was drawing so much is because I completely lowered the entry bar. To make art, I didn't have to take out my sketchbook, the paints, the paint brushes, paper towels, water, the water bucket, you know the whole deal. I could just take out my tiny sketchbook and a pen anywhere, everywhere, and just start drawing. And because it felt so simple, I was drawing constantly. It also became such a beautiful way of remembering the trip. I now have so many tiny sketches that are tied to beautiful memories. I'll always remember where I was sitting, what I was drinking, or who was next to me. And there's something really beautiful about that. I didn't pay much attention to this before, but there are so many little moments on a regular day when I'm just waiting. I'm either waiting for the bus, for my friends, for my number at the bank, waiting for anything. Every single time, without thinking, I would just take out my phone and start scrolling. And then turn around and say, I don't have any time to draw. But during this trip, something changed for me. Because I had this tiny sketchbook with me everywhere, I started using those little waiting moments for sketching. And it was so much fun. Also, what they don't tell you about sketching in the metro is that because everyone else is glued to their phones, no one realizes when you're drawing them. So there's no awkward eye contact moments. It's perfect. And ever since that trip, I keep doing this all the time. Whenever I'm commuting, waiting, stuck in between things, or just happily out with my friends, I reach out for my little sketchbook instead of my phone. And not because I want to be productive or whatever, it's just because it genuinely feels nice. And what's funny for me now is that during that trip I kept repeating to myself, I just can't find the time to draw. Meanwhile, I did have the time. I was just waiting for the perfect setup, the perfect moment, or taking all of those art supplies out of my huge backpack, getting overwhelmed and then scrolling. But once it was just a tiny sketchbook and a pen, it became so easy to use these moments. And without noticing, they start to add up. Suddenly, I was drawing way more than ever before. And because of that, something else started to change. And honestly, this one surprised me a little bit. Even though I've heard from so many artists that drawing with ink helped them feel more confident with drawing, I always thought, that's not gonna be me. Because I've noticed that sometimes I struggle with being seen trying, especially if I might fail. I even have this embarrassing story from when I was younger. I really wanted a six-pack. Okay, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So I would always do so many sit-ups, but only when I was alone. If I was by myself, I was doing sit-ups. And if I even thought about anyone walking into me mid-crunch, I wanted to evaporate. And I've thought about this a lot. I really don't think it's about the wanting the six-pack, which, yes, that's embarrassing. But I think it's more about being seen trying to get them. And I think this feeling still sneaks up on me sometimes, which is kind of funny because I genuinely believe with my whole heart and soul that there's nothing cooler than trying, and trying hard. Being passionate, being excited, wanting to learn new things. But being seen trying, that can feel a bit different. So the idea of drawing in public with ink where I couldn't really erase any mistakes was a bit scary at first. But in Japan, being a tourist is already kind of embarrassing. I mean, you're lost, you're confused, you're carrying a huge backpack around like a art ninja turtle. So I thought, okay, fine, let's just add drawing to the mix. And as you know with ink, once a line is down, it's down. You just have to roll with it. At first that made me a bit nervous, but after a while I stopped caring. If the drawing wasn't working, I would just draw a little sad face next to it and move on to the next one. Sometimes you make a bad line. Sometimes the person that you're trying to draw gets off the metro before you're finished. Sometimes the anatomy is not great. And it really doesn't matter. If the drawing ends up being bad, that's okay. Because honestly, what's cool is that you're trying. And daring to do that made me feel more confident. Not because the drawings were perfect or anything, but because I kept going. And this one wasn't something that I planned. It just kind of happened. Once I stopped overthinking every line, my hand just loosened up. Suddenly my drawings felt easier, more fluid. And I think a big part of that is that I was drawing from life constantly. You see, even when you draw someone's shoes or a backpack or a stranger on the metro, that's helping you learn to see better. Maybe not perfectly, but enough to learn how to trust the lines that you're making. And when you learn to see better, you overthink less. So your hand just moves. Now I do draw faster, but it's not really about the speed. It's about the confidence that I feel. It's about my hand trusting my eyes. But after all that, the biggest surprise was something far more simple. I'm not sure why this one surprised me so much. I guess it's because I always saw ink as something that you use for signing important documents, but not for sketching and definitely not for having fun. And as much as I love taking my art practice seriously and study from the masters, I also like drawing silly things that make me smile. There are so many little sketches in my sketchbook that only exist with the purpose of making me laugh. And for some reason, I never thought I was allowed to do that with ink. It felt too serious or too permanent. And honestly, if you're not used to drawing with ink, the first few drawings will be a bit scary. You're probably going to have to push yourself through it. But after a while, that pressure sort of drops. And that ended up being really important for me because I feel like sometimes my perfectionism stops me before I even start to do something. But with ink, I'm learning to let go of that too. Because with ink, you can't erase. You just have to start, hope for the best, and keep going. And if the drawing is not turning out how you wanted, move on to the next one. And the more I started practicing this in my art, the more I started to learn to let go of the things that are not working, the more something much deeper started to make sense in my brain. I feel like a lot of us stay in situations or in old versions of ourselves that don't serve us anymore because starting over feels too scary or like we're too late. But with ink, I'm learning that starting over is not failing. It's just turning the page and trying again. And what's wild is that this huge life realization came from me buying this random pen at a 7-Eleven one night. So if you're waiting for the perfect moment to start drawing again, maybe all you need is a pen.